Hey everyone, Adam Mitchell here, and I'm glad you're with me. This brings us to lesson number 2 on running a dojo. Just to quickly review, on that last video, we talked a little bit about expectations. This is a really important thing. This is a distinguishing factor for a traditional martial arts school. This is what sets us apart from mixed martial arts gyms and eclectic martial arts schools, conventional martial arts schools. There are a number of very important factors that as a traditional martial arts school owner or training group leader or future school owner or training group leader, someone who's maybe you're thinking about getting started in this, you have to understand that there are some variables that set us apart, and those really have to be identified, and you have to know how those factors are used correctly to serve your students and to serve your obligations. And I always point behind me because my sensei is looking over my shoulder, and his senseis, and his sensei, and so on back. Because I come from a very long tradition of Japanese martial arts. So I have an obligation to retain that. I have an obligation to preserve that, and to be able to make sure that it's preserved for the future generations going on. So we have obligations to our students, we have obligations to our instructor, and we have obligations to the heritage in which we're trying to preserve. Now I want to get into checking our facility a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about how I have the setup here in my dojo. And this is really important because you never get that second chance to make a first impression. And when a student walks into your dojo, one of the things that I really try to promote is that you want a student to step back in time. Because if they're pursuing traditional martial arts, the tradition didn't start in 1988. The tradition started to them, what is prehistory. To them, which is something that they want to walk into an experience and be able to something that is going to connect with all their senses. The first thing is when they walk in, they want to see a clean and unique environment. They don't want to walk into a white wall school with mirrors and a blue mat with kicking bags over there and we are a black belt academy and all the things that they would expect. We have to diversify a bit. We have to actually take the spirit of our arts, the origin of our arts, and we have to apply that to the environment that they're going to be training in. So as you can see in my dojo, I basically used some barn siding, some textural 111, and that's what I've always used for the last 14 years. That's what I've used on the walls of my dojo. There's a certain way that I treat this, and I also use, I'm a big fan of VOC-free materials, paints, and stains and stuff. My weapon racks, I try to use as much recycled wood as possible. So here's a really cool thing that you can do that I've done is I found a local mill that the tree guys go to. If you don't know where your local mill is, pull over any of the tree guys in your town and say, hey, where do you take your trees to get cut or where do you sell them to? And they always have a yield pile. They always have a pile of bark wood. When they're cutting down their planks, it's their garbage pile, and they either burn it or, they have mountains of them there. I go there and I buy truckloads of the stuff, and I built my dojo off of this junk wood. So all my weapon racks are made from this. Now what's important is that I've put my weapon racks at a 6.5 foot height above where any students are going to be. So if a student goes up against the wall, if we're grappling or we're doing some randori, we hit the wall, they're not going to hit my weapon racks. But they're not too high where you can't access them. Another thing is that when you walk into a dojo, you want to be able to see, like, wow, there's swords, there's spears, there's hanbo, there's short swords. I'm going to be able to use all this stuff. But this stuff has to be maintained. The stuff has to also be used. Don't put wall hangers up in your dojo. If it's not getting used and it doesn't serve a purpose, it should not be in the walls of your martial arts school or your training group. I'm going to propose that if you work out of a gym or something like that, that you have a fold-up table, and that about 15 to 20 minutes before class, you set up your weapon racks, you set up the training implements that you're going to use for class, but you create somewhat of a traditional dojo environment for your training rather than just throwing the mats down and going for it. I think that's okay too, but making sure that things are aligned correctly, making sure that you have, if you're like me and you come from a Japanese origin, you want to make sure that the spatial relationships are correct. And there's plenty of books and stuff out there that you can read, but I don't want to get too far into this. I just want to talk about basic expectations when a student comes into your dojo, what they need to see. Now, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we can change. The first thing I want you to think about is, do you have stuff all over your floor? Do you have a bucket over here? Do you have a shelf over there where you've got medicine balls and stacks of focus mitts and all that crap? Get it out of your dojo. A traditional martial arts school, as you know, needs to be open, it needs to be spacious, and it needs to be simple. It needs to be, when someone walks in, they should have a relaxed feeling. They should say, wow, this is pretty amazing, I belong here. And it should really have a sense of being natural. Because once again, we want our students to step back in time. We don't want to have, brushed aluminum on the walls and neon lights along the rim of the ceiling and all that stuff. If you're running a kickboxing program, you've got an eclectic martial arts school, that's cool. I'm down with that. I think it's good. But for what we're trying to accomplish, we have an obligation to fulfill expectations of people coming in. So, simplicity, safety, and organization. So, your task on this lesson is, I'd like you to take out that piece of paper again, another piece of paper and a pencil, and I want you to write down, we're going to make 2 columns on your paper. On the left column, you're going to write at the top, student. On the right column, you're going to write instructor. On the left side, I want you to write 5 things as a student that you would want to see. Go back to the beginning. Go back to when you were sitting out in your car and you were nervous about going because you didn't know what to expect. You didn't know what the teacher was going to ask of you, and you had that fear. What were the 5 things that if you walked into the dojo and you saw, you were like, put you at ease, made you feel empowered, made you say, this is the place I belong? What are those 5 things? So go ahead, stop this video right now, write those 5 things down. Alright, I hope you took action here, and I hope you wrote those 5 things down because it's going to help serve you. On the right side, as an instructor, I want you to write down 5 things in your dojo, 5 items that you don't use, that are hanging on the wall, that are collecting dust, that, they really don't mean anything, whether it's a piece of art or it's some type of tapestry. I want you to write, or there's something, a hole in the wall that you just haven't used, but there's some type of obstacle that affects the student's perception and expectation of the dojo when they first walk in. I want you to write 5 things down that are eyesores, that don't serve any purpose whatsoever. There's that wall-hanging sword with the dragon and the skull on it that's been hanging there for the last 5 years that one of your students gave you, and to make the student feel good, you put it up there. Write down 5 things that you don't need at your dojo right now. Go ahead, pause this video, do that right now. Okay, everyone, on the left side here, we have a student's perspective. We have 5 things, hopefully you made it up to 10 things, that you wanted to see that when you walked in, you felt at ease, you felt like this is great, you felt empowered, you felt this is a place I want to belong to, this is a legacy that I want to be a part of, this is something fantastic. And then on the right side, you've got a list of items in your dojo or your training group right now that just don't belong, that serve no purpose. What I want you to do is, I want you now, after I stop this video, because we're about to wrap it up here, you're going to take each one of those line items, and you're going to write how you are going to implement that. So if you said, when I walked in, I would have really liked to have seen a shoe shelf right there, but right now we just have a stack of milk cartons. How are you going to put a shoe shelf in your dojo right now? How are you going to take those steps? How are you going to get there? Okay, now, on the right side, what's the one thing that you're going to do to eliminate that obstacle, that paradigm obstacle, that expectation obstacle, that comfort zone? How are you going to make it more subconsciously comfort for when a student walks into your dojo? Are you going to take that thing off the wall? Are you going to, take those milk cartons out of the corner? Are you going to stop leaving stuff all over the place? So, let's go ahead, let's take action on both of these columns, let's get started, and let's begin to turn around the expectations of our students, because right now we're looking at retaining students, and we're making sure that when students walk in, they don't look around and immediately, subconsciously begin to question who you are as an instructor.